Hi, this is attorney Jamie Miller, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Miller Law Chronicle podcast. Very excited about this one. Yesterday, very breaking news, big news in the bankruptcy world with the filing of the Rudy Giuliani Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And in today's podcast, we're going to review the schedules, the documents that were filed by Mr. Giuliani, and we're going to talk about the impact of the Chapter 11 filing on the defamation lawsuit that was filed by Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss in Georgia. We're also going to talk about interesting fact that he filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So why not a Chapter 7, which is a total discharge? Why not a personal Chapter 13, which is a personal repayment plan? And why he chose to file an individual Chapter 11. And if you know Chapter 11s, we normally look at those as bankruptcies that are primarily filed for businesses. But today we're going to take a look at a personal Chapter 11 and the path that I see former Mayor Giuliani taking with regard to this Chapter 11 filing. And again, thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate it. It's so wonderful to see our listenership continue to climb. And if you are enjoying podcasts, please subscribe to our Miller and Miller Law YouTube page. Please subscribe to our Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get our podcasts. We'd really appreciate it if you'd like us so we can continue to bring this great free content. Thank you so much and have a great day. Hey, how is everyone? Attorney Jamie Miller here, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Miller Law Chronicles. And a lot of what we do is focus on different bankruptcy issues, and something really happened interesting in the bankruptcy world yesterday. Yesterday, 12/21, so December 21st of 2023, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And very interesting. And this follows a judgment for defamation that was given against him several weeks ago in that Georgia defamation case, which goes back to when Rudy was representing Donald Trump during the 2020 election, which I'm sure everyone remembers. So I want to spend some time just kind of talk about it and help people understand why he filed a Chapter 11, not a Chapter 7, not a Chapter 13, and what the impact of this is going to be on the plaintiff's ability to collect the over $150 million judgment that they have against Mr. Giuliani. So according to the bankruptcy filing, Mr. Giuliani had about $500 million in total debt. Now, if you remember, this is another huge setback for the mayor, the former mayor of New York City, former mayor of New York City. He was a federal prosecutor, and he was even, if you remember, the front runner for the Republican nomination for President of the United States several years ago. And all of this whole bankruptcy situation stems from his representation of Donald Trump during Donald Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election results. The bankruptcy petition that was filed by former Mayor Giuliani is very revealing. It's a very thorough document that reveals all of Rudy's debts and obligations and income and expenses. And the bankruptcy petition revealed that he has over $1 million in tax debt. So he owes $700,000 to the IRS and over $300,000 to the state of New York. He has pending lawsuits in 3 other defamation cases. And I didn't know this, but I noticed in the bankruptcy petition, one of the pending defamation lawsuits that he is defending is a lawsuit that was filed against him by Hunter Biden, the son of President Biden, of course. And then he also has, interestingly enough, another defamation case pending against him by a company called Smartmatic. And this is another voting machine technology company. So why did he file a Chapter 11 bankruptcy instead of a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13? So when somebody files a Chapter 7, there's certain limits on the income. And so in order to qualify for a Chapter 7, your income needs to be for an individual. Now, he's divorced. I don't think he has any dependents. So I would think that he's an individual. So his income has to be less than about $70,000 a year to qualify for a Chapter 7. So I think when he was meeting with his bankruptcy lawyers, the idea of doing a Chapter 7 wasn't going to work because his income was going to be too high. So why not file a Chapter 13? So Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 are both consumer type bankruptcy cases. So he likely didn't file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is a repayment plan, because in a personal Chapter 13, your total debts, secured, unsecured, so secured debts like a mortgage or a car loan, your total secured debts and unsecured debts have to be less than $2.75 million. So he didn't do a Chapter 13 because he had more debts than a Chapter 13 would allow. So that leaves the door open for a filing of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is a repayment plan. And many people think of Chapter 11 as a type of a bankruptcy that can only be filed for a business. Well, many individuals, many high income earners, and many people that have debts exceeding $2.75 million choose to file a personal Chapter 11. And the personal Chapter 11 in Mr. Giuliani's case is going to accomplish a couple things. Number one, an orderly repayment of his debts. So the plaintiffs that he owes in the lawsuit, that was Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. You remember they were mother and daughter. So that's the big claim in the bankruptcy. But what the Chapter 11 is going to do is allow Mr. Giuliani to pay back essentially what he can afford to pay back. So it's a repayment plan. Now, the caveat is the debt owed to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the plaintiffs in the Georgia case, is that one that really can be considered or paid back in a Chapter 11 at a reduced rate? This defamation case is an intentional tort. It means that it was done with the intent to defame or intentionally malicious. Those types of debts are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So what's likely going to happen is the plaintiffs, Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss, are going to file an adversary proceeding against Mr. Giuliani in the Chapter 11, seeking to determine that the debts owed to them are non-dischargeable. And if the bankruptcy court comes back and says the $150 million that they owe Ruby Moss and Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss is non-dischargeable, essentially the bankruptcy is not going to have any impact on how much they're going to get paid or the Chapter 11's ability to pay back that debt at a reduced rate. So if it's determined non-dischargeable, that whole debt is going to be due to the plaintiffs, Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss. So that'll get litigated or tried in the bankruptcy court. So, and I would bet, if I was a betting man, that that debt will be deemed non-dischargeable. And I'm sure Mr. Giuliani knows that the filing of the Chapter 11 is going to give him, temporary relief. And so why would he file a Chapter 11 if he knows that that debt may not be dischargeable? Well, Mr. Giuliani is 79 years old. He's probably not in great health. The filing of the Chapter 11 does give him an automatic stay or an injunction that prevents the creditors from bothering him. So just last week, the judge in the Georgia case told the plaintiffs, hey, listen, you have your judgment. You can now go try to collect on Mr. Giuliani's assets. It's okay to go do that. So in order to protect Mr. Giuliani, his lawyers filed this Chapter 11, which stayed all collection efforts. And it gives Mr. Giuliani time. It gives him a time to appeal the Georgia case. If you remember in a press conference after the judgment came out in favor of Ms. Moss and Ms. Friedman, that Rudy Giuliani came to the press conference and denied responsibility, said he was going to appeal. Experts are saying that it's unlikely that he would prevail in an appeal. However, the filing of the Chapter 11 does give him time to get that appeal in and kind of see where that goes. It's an interesting case. It'll be interesting to see, where this goes, and just what a fall from grace. Mr. Giuliani, I guess, for months has been trying to sell his Upper East Side condo, $6.1 million. So maybe the filing of the bankruptcy is going to give a stay and give him some time to perhaps raise some cash. But he owes so much money, more than he's ever going to be able to pay. He owes the state of New York. He owes the IRS. He owes these plaintiffs over $150 million. He owes lawyer fees upon lawyers' fees. And, several years ago, he got divorced, and his divorce decree, which when you get divorced, you're required to publicly submit your income and expenses. And he had a spending habit, at least at the time of the divorce, of spending $230,000 a month, had 6 houses and 11 country club memberships. And this was all, he was in a very lucrative private practice after he left public office. So was making a lot of money practicing law. Why he ever left the law practice, the lucrative practice, to go to work for Donald Trump, who knows? But I'm sure that even at this time, he's probably asking himself the question. So interesting case. I'll continue to follow it and see what happens, but I predict that this case will probably be around for 6 or 7 months. Will allow Mr. Giuliani to spend whatever money he has, whatever limited assets he has in the time being, and live the best life that he can. But just, the stress, the well-deserved stress that he's feeling now has to have reached a boiling point for him. And the Chapter 11 was filed to give him a little relief and help him, move forward a little bit as he, is close to being 80 years old. So interesting. We'll see what happens. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Our listenership continues to grow. And if you like our podcast, which I hope you do, please go to YouTube and subscribe to the Miller and Miller page. You could also go to Spotify podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and like us, friend us, whatever it is. The more friends and the more likes we get the easier it is for us to continue to offer this great content. Be well, and we will talk to you soon.